o'clock. If you're in the room, can you just make sure to sign in at some point for the minutes? The public can access this meeting via WebEx technology. The meeting will be held in person here. Members of the public are welcome to attend this in-person meeting. Please note that while an option for remote attendance and/or participation is being provided as a courtesy to the public, the meeting will not be suspended or terminated if technological problems interrupt the virtual broadcast unless otherwise required by law. Members of the public with particular interest in a specific item on the agenda should make plans for in-person versus virtual attendance accordingly. The meeting number is 2354-957-2019, and the password is Burlington with a capital B. Our first agenda item is the approval of the July 13th meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, Mrs. Bond?
Aye.
Mrs. Monaco?
Aye.
Ms. Simon?
Aye.
Mr. Brooks?
Aye.
Dr. Conti?
Yes.
Ms. Kasha?
Yes.
Mr. Cuna?
Yes.
Mr. Sagarino?
Yes.
Ms. Priest?
Aye.
Mrs. Bunker?
Yes.
Mr. And that's it. An I am an I. 1, 2, 3, 1100. The next agenda item is our previous public comment responses.
Okay, so there are some comments that we wanted to go over tonight that were from 2 SBC meetings ago, as well as some comments that were made at the community forum meeting, and some comments that we received through the building project website. And so we're just going to address all of those comments tonight. The first comment was in regards to what are the stakes for that are in the ground on Vincent Road, and will there be any changes to Vincent Road? So no stakes were put in by the project at all, and there have been no discussion or intent to make any changes to Vincent Road. The next question was, is there a formal timeline showing 18 months of the project? The project schedule shown through the end of construction / closeout is on the project website and can be found at the link within the presentation. It's also under documents. You will find the project schedule there, but I just want to be clear, it goes beyond 18 months, and it outlines the different options that we're currently studying. So you'll see that there's a variation of the schedule based on the different options as far as timing goes. The next question is, if it is decided to do a 325 enrollment Fox Hill School and decided to do the Pine Glen School 10 to 15 years later, is there a chance for MSBA reimbursement? It is our understanding, should the town of Burlington not choose to include Pine Glen as part of this project, the MSBA will not participate in any future expansion / construction to the school. The next question was, have you studied a parking deck with 2 levels or a covered deck which can support solar panels? We have not studied a parking deck at this point, and as part of the PSR process, we can discuss this option with the SBC. The next question is in what other neighboring towns, cities do larger elementary schools exist? And so based off of the MSBA's website, we were able to find some schools within neighboring towns that are similar in size. And so the first we listed was the Mariah Hastings Elementary School with 645 students, 110,000 square feet, and it's in Lexington. It's a K-5 school. The Thomas Ditson Elementary School has 738 students. It's 105,000 square feet. It's located in Billerica, and it's a K-5 school. The Lieutenant Job Lane Elementary School with 564 students. It's 80,000 and a half square feet. It's located in Bedford, and it's a 3-5 elementary school. We also listed the Bancroft Elementary School. It's 469 students, 67,600 square feet. It's located in Andover, and it's also a K-5 school. Lastly, the West Elementary School, which is currently in construction, 677 students, 94,000 square feet. It's located in Andover, and it's a pre-K through 5 school. And so ultimately, as a project team, we just wanted to make sure we were addressing everyone's questions and comments, but ultimately, whatever the project is that the town of Burlington would like to proceed with, obviously, as your team, we support whatever option that you want to move forward with. From the taxpayer information that was shared with the SBC/community, is it an annual or a one-time cost impact? The impact information that was shared is based on an annual payment to taxpayers until the bond is paid out. Next question that we received are why are we required to study a consolidated Fox Hill and Pine Glen school? This one has a couple different bullets. There's a couple different pages, so I'll start with, in 2020, the statement of interest included consideration of studying a consolidated project. On March 8th, 2022, the district executed the enrollment certification with the MSBA. And so this is an excerpt that comes from the enrollment certification that states that you have the enrollment for grades K through 5 at the Fox Hill Elementary School of 325 students, as well as an enrollment for grades K through 5 at a consolidated Fox Hill Elementary School and Pine Glen Elementary School with 640 students. The enrollment certification can be found on our website using the link that's within the presentation at the bottom. Next, we wanted to include, yeah.
Just, I know it's parsing words, but the previous question regarding the tax impact information, just a clarifying statement, it's versus annual payment, it's an annual cost of the taxpayers until the bond is paid out.
Sorry. Yep.
Yep.
Ms. Monica?
Yeah, I just, on the, there are two things that we've talked about so far that I just want to mention.
Okay.
One is when you read the part about why we had to do both options, what it really says is the feasibility study for this proposed project may examine an option to consolidate. It doesn't say will.
Chris, I'm sorry, can you just pull the mic closer?
Oh,
Sorry.
I have it on. Yeah, okay, yeah, it says may. And also the part about it is our understanding that MSBA will not participate in a Pine Glen school in the future. I don't know where that came from. I think that it was an assumption based on if we don't consolidate, they're going to be mad at us and they won't help us in the future. But I have not seen, and I don't know if anyone else has, I have not seen any documentation saying that they won't help us. And in fact, when I asked Dr. Conti, he said we can apply every year and we can include Pine Glen. So I don't think that's accurate. I also, and I know there's someone who's going to speak under public participation about the size of the schools, so I'll leave that one until that. And that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you. As a third part of the previous, or the question as far as the consolidated Fox Hill and Pine Glen, beyond the enrollment certification, we also included an excerpt that comes from the feasibility study agreement, which is the document that's executed between the district and the MSBA. I apologize that when I highlighted it through PowerPoint, I don't wonder why it looks like that on Bluebeam, but so ultimately, the feasibility study for the proposed project may examine an option to consolidate grades K through 5 from the Fox Hill Elementary School with grades K through 5 from the Pine Glen Elementary School, which for purposes of the design shall be based on no more than 640 students. Exclusive of the consolidation proposal and using information from the base enrollment projection, a design enrollment shall be based on no more than 325 students in grades K through 5 for the Fox Hill Elementary School. The district will prepare and submit to the MSBA the educational space summaries for both options for review and acceptance. Again, this document can be found on our website, and it's in the link on this page in the presentation. We also wanted to include an excerpt from the feasibility study guidelines that are on the MSBA's website. It's a document under Module 3 feasibility study, and this is the excerpt from page 9. So a couple of things that we highlighted that we thought were important also to state is that as part of the preliminary evaluation of alternatives, we should include at least the following. So we're required to include a code upgrade option, a renovation and/or addition, and a construction of a new building. In addition to that, on page 10, it states the preliminary evaluation of alternatives shall conclude with a list of at least 3 distinct alternatives, including at least one renovation and/or addition option that maximizes the use of the facility. And so the link also to the Module 3 feasibility study guidelines, page 9, page 10, the whole guidelines are also listed in the link below within the presentation.
Thank you, Christina. The next agenda item is our public comment. So we are doing 15 minutes now, and we'll do 15 minutes at the end. You have 3 minutes. I will start in the room. Please come on up. Yep. Make sure the mic's on and you're speaking into it. No.
Okay, thank you. Hi, I'm Barbara LaRue, and I am the current chair of the Planning Board. I came here to make comments in 2 capacities. First, as the chair of the Planning Board, I have received a copy of the traffic report. I haven't had a chance to absorb all of it yet, but I have passed it on to our staff and wanted to let everyone know that we are going to take a very careful look at that. We do have a number of options that we can take, things that we can employ to mitigate the traffic. And although we haven't had a chance to fully absorb it, we want to reassure everyone that we do believe that there are quite a few different methods we can employ to help the traffic situation if indeed the committee decides to move forward with the larger school option. And the planning board and the planning staff who have expertise in this area are standing ready to assist and help in any way we can. So now I'm switching to my comment as a resident, and actually it's more of a question. Assuming if the committee decides to move forward with the single school option or the 300 and something student option and keep Pine Glen, if indeed the state does not support a second elementary school and does not give us funding for that, am I correct in understanding that the town would need to do a Proposition 2.5 override to pay for a second elementary school? Is that a reasonable assumption?
Yes,
Okay.
probably.
Okay. So my concern with that as a resident is that I'm worried it might not pass. And if the 2.5, if that's the route we go, and the 2.5, the Proposition 2.5 doesn't pass, then we have our equity problem, because we have a large percentage of students in town who are in new, updated buildings, and then a small group of students at Pine Glen who are in what really can only be described as a dilapidated building that was built many, many, many decades ago. Is there a plan to address that if a Prop 2.5 fails?
Yeah, we can bring that to the next meeting.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I
Thank you.
appreciate your time.
Sure.
Can I just make a statement? We do have a committee put together, through the chair.
Okay.
We do have a committee put together to help address that as far as Pine Glen is concerned. So it's not as if it's for Pine Glen. We have a group of people who, we said, we're discussing it every school committee meeting. Sorry, I want to restate that. So it's not like we've forgotten about Pine Glen. We're
Oh.
discussing Pine Glen.
I'm sure you didn't forget about
Right.
Pine Glen.
No, and a plan forward with Pine Glen and how to deal with it. So we are, something that we're bringing up in every meeting, just like the high school, right? So it's not that we've
Yes.
forgotten about it.
Okay, I understand. I just wanted to express the concern that without state funding, if we can't pass a Proposition 2.5, I don't know how we would pay for that school's, I don't know if it probably wouldn't be a renovation, it would probably be more like a new school in order to provide equity. And it seems like it's an enormous endeavor, at the same time as the town will be, hopefully, trying to have a new high school and a new police station. And I'm just concerned that we might not be able to get all of those things through the electorate. And I don't want the children that live in the Pine Glen area to suffer. So, thank you.
Thank you. Yep.
Yeah, I did.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to correct something. My understanding is that even for the single Fox Hill School, we're looking at a debt exclusion, possibly, probably. I keep looking at Paul Sagarino because it's been coming. Possibly, so is that, can I take that to the bank? Possibly? All right, thank you. I got him on the record. Thank you very much.
Should I go ahead?
Yes,
Can you hear
please.
me?
Yep.
Okay. I was asked to come here by some community members and some members of the board because I'm a resident and parent, and I'm not against a butterfly school. And I think there's been a lot of voices who have very valid concerns about a larger school that would need to be addressed if we go in that direction. But I just wanted to share that there are also a number of members of the community who perhaps haven't shared that actually aren't concerned. Did I say my name? My name is Becky Norum. I'm a 15-year resident of Burlington. I have 3 kids. One attended Fox Hill for a few years, and we moved over to Francis Wyman. I volunteer with the CPAC, Burlington Youth and Family Services, and I'm also a town meeting member. It was a shock. I went to 6 different school systems growing up as a civilian military family. And it was a shock to me when I moved from Fox Hill to Francis Wyman to have Fox Hill parents inform me that I was moving to the wrong side of the tracks. I'm like, this is suburban Boston. There's not a wrong side of the tracks. But there seems to be a contingent in town that do firmly believe that Fox Hill is somehow more special than any other and deserving more than any other area of town, and that concerns me greatly from an equity and community perspective, because all of our community elementary schools should be serving all of our community members, whether they live in a $2 million home in Fox Hill or whether or not they live in Lord Barron. And whatever results come out of this vote, I feel pretty confident that most of the committee members I've talked to know that equity is something we really need to keep at the top of our mind. We can't move to have one school be 325 and then put the kids, including Lord Barron, in a 600-kid school. That would be pretty bad. So just ask you to continue to be pragmatic, balance the needs financially and socially and educationally across the board, and not just pay attention to the loudest voices in the room. There's a lot going on here, and I trust that you all will make the best decision for Burlington. I don't pretend to know what it is, but just continue to have the equity lens. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yep, come on up. Oh, okay.
My carefully written notes as I scribbled them down on the way out the door. Pat Angelo, I'm the town meeting.
Can you move the mic just a tiny bit closer? You can pull the whole thing, yeah.
Okay. Pat Angelo, I'm also a town meeting member. How many millions will we lose from the state if we don't go with the two schools done at the same time?
It's impossible to say.
I don't know off the top of my head the difference.
I mean, are we
think it's
talking
30 or
two
40.
Okay, we're not talking 2 or 3, we're talking like 20 or 25 or,
At least, yes.
oh, okay. Now, will this require, what's the difference between a debt exclusion and 2.5 override?
The difference is, sorry. Ms. Angelo, the difference, push it on. Ours are always on it, the select board is on. Ms. Angelo, the difference is that an override is technically a permanent increase to the tax base, where a debt exclusion, you're allowed to increase the tax levy strictly for the amount of the debt that we'd be paying each year until it's paid off, and then it goes away, and it's no longer a part of the resident's tax bill.
Okay,
So
okay.
override is permanent. A debt exclusion is technically temporary, although it would more than likely be for a period of, 25 or 30 years, as long as we are paying the debt.
Okay, thank you. I went down and I spoke to Marge down in the senior center because I'm concerned, being a senior citizen, about what this is going to do, to people. And I asked her, because I thought there was going to be a meeting in September, to look into that and include it on the bulletin so that the seniors are aware of what's happening and will come to this meeting if we do have it. Now, the CPA, that vote that was taken earlier, did not pass. It failed in all 7 precincts. So, I mean, I think if you go for a 2.5 override, I think that it's going to be the same. People squawked at paying as did I, at paying another $75, on their taxes. And if they're going to be hit with the 2.5, I stood outside that Saturday with a sign to vote no on this, and I'll do the same thing on a 2.5 override, except I'll stand out every day if I have to, because people cannot afford this. This is becoming a town where people, either young people starting out or old folk like me, are not going to be able to continue to live here, anymore. And I think the senior citizens, when anybody's running for election, everybody starts courting them because they're the ones who come out and vote, and they will vote no on a 2.5 override. So I think maybe you better start, Paul, you better start juggling the numbers again so that we don't have to do a 2.5, override. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go, there's one hand online.
Chris Campbell.
Okay, go ahead.
Hello, Chris Campbell, Precinct 1, and also on Ways and Means. I want to respectfully disagree with the numbers that were just presented regarding the school numbers, and I really think it's important that we have the right numbers. I believe the numbers were presented based off MSBA numbers, which is building capacity, but it's not actually based off of DESE enrollment numbers. And so these enrollment numbers for those schools, 5 schools that were listed for the 2022-23 school years. So Maria Hastings had 598 kids, Thomas Ditson had 557, Lieutenant Job Lane School had 587, Bancroft had 543, and West Elementary had 555. This was all presented in a spreadsheet I sent to every one of the members of this committee, but I really think it's important that we think about what the actual capacity of these schools are versus where the enrollment is. Because if these schools are at capacity of 700, but they're not having that many students there, why did they make the change? This is where we need to be investing in what is going on with these communities and these schools and better know why they're making these changes. And in these schools, when they are so big, how do they feel about it? Because when I'm talking to some of my colleagues in Bedford and Lexington, they do not like it. And so when we're really thinking about what's best for our students, best for our teachers, and best for an educational community, we need to remember where our kids do grow best, where they do learn best. And when we're looking at a Proposition 2.5, if we have to go that route, why aren't we thinking combining the schools, the police together? Because if that is what, and we can't do a debt exclusion, we can't do something else, we bring it all together and say, this is our community, we need to invest in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll do one more. And Eileen had, I think, her hand up before you did, sorry. And then we have 15 at the end.
Thank you, and good evening to everyone. My name is Eileen Sickler. I'm a town meeting member, Precinct 4, and I just have a prepared statement here. To be fair and transparent to all Burlington taxpayers, and that's residential and commercial, I would like a public schedule prepared by the town's financial team with help from Ways and Means showing the tax impact over the next 20 to 30 years from building new schools. That's the potentially 2 elementary schools and the high school, as well as a new police station. This schedule would also include assumptions and amounts for the following: the residential tax impact and the commercial tax impact. This is something I haven't heard anyone talk about, and I think it's so important because, as you know, they pay 2/3 or so of that tax bill. Also, an annual increase. What is the annual increase to the levy? And then lastly, other related financial impacts because of the debt. You know, is this going to affect our operating budgets in the future? Also, the bond rating. I mean, sort of again, what are the effects of that? Lastly, we need a calendar, that is a timeline, showing the key dates for procedurally moving this along from voting at town meeting to the ballot box. Obviously, all those documents need to be posted on the town's website. Unfortunately, this doesn't affect just one school building, which makes knowing the financial impact of all of these pieces, including the police station, critical to making an informed decision for taxpayers in the near and far future. Only by providing the public with facts will help us make the best decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a question? Okay, we said 15 minutes at the beginning and 15 at the end. Do I have other people in the room that want to speak now? All right, we can do you two. And then I'll close out the initial public comment.
All right. Dave Wadilla, Precinct 1, also a town meeting member. One quick comment. I went to a 100-year-old elementary school. I think I turned out just fine. The age of the building doesn't matter. It's the education inside. Okay. One piece of administrative questions here. The Massachusetts SBA enrollment projections. Okay. Within this document, I'm confused. It talks about this being an updated document. I'm wondering if there's a plan to update this document. There's some information in here that I think is incorrect, irrelevant, mistakes. I don't know. I think it ought to be fixed. One is a reference to, I'll quote it, historic births in Hopkinton have been fairly stable, which is nice, but this is Burlington, right? The other item is the calculation methods that they project at the bottom of page 5 are incorrect, right? They don't add up to what they should add up to when I go and do the math. So I think at a minimum, the document should be corrected. Hopefully you can go get another assessment of what the town is, what the projections are for the town, because it's been a few years. We should do that. The second piece is you have an item, vote to approach the select board on a non-binding selectman vote. My opinion, it's simply my opinion. I'm here to give public comment. Your job, not the selectmen's, is to bring forward your best technical recommendation to the school committee and then to the town for this project. The selectmen have a different job, different priorities, and they are represented here on the committee. Their opinion, and that's all this would be, should have no bearing on your best recommendation. I encourage you to stand up, take your responsibility seriously without the crutch of the selectmen. You're trusted with this job. Please just do the job. I know it's difficult. We don't need the selectmen having a non-binding vote here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chairman. Nolan Glantz, live in Precinct 1, actually not far from the Foxville School, and town meeting member. I appreciate you letting me come up briefly at the beginning because I wanted to talk about the referendum, and by the end it'll be too late. So if we do wind up going for a townwide vote for the financial reasons, whether that's a debt exclusion vote or whatnot, it seems a little, I don't know if redundant is the right word, to go for 2 townwide votes, one for the non-binding referendum, and then to go back again for the financial vote. Been in town 24 years, which to some people is very short, but long enough to have lived through the last time we tried to do that, which was about 20 years ago, when we tried to build the kindergarten center, and that got voted down at town meeting. But then part of the complaint was that we wanted to build Memorial School and wanted to fix up the middle school and not instead, or in addition, or first, and whatever. So we said, all right, people want to do all 3. We came to do all 3. That needed a debt exclusion, and it was a very bitter battle between should the taxes go up or not, and do we really need to do these now? Can we do them later? What can we put off? And it was very divisive for the community. These townwide votes, while it sounds like a good idea to try to get everyone's input instead of just the people who are at these meetings and voicing their opinions, it's very, very hard and very impactful. As far as what project to put forth, I think that should be up to this committee. If we eventually need, for financial reasons, to go to a townwide vote, then we will. But I think as far as coming up with a recommendation, I think that's what the due diligence work of this committee is for, as opposed to trying to ask the public what they think in a non-binding way. It's going to be way more than it's really worth, I think, in terms of just getting input. So that'd be my recommendation, is just to move forward as opposed to try to take a townwide vote. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Okay, so next, so to clarify, Paul, do you want to lead out with this?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, on a non-binding referendum, earlier on in this process, it became pretty clear to me that there was, different opinions as to what direction the town should go to in terms of the 3 or the 4 school model. As you would expect in a situation like this, I do feel like that we've heard a lot from Fox Hill neighbors concerned about the traffic and parents of Fox Hill children. That makes a lot of sense that they would be the ones that are most interested in this project, but I do think that in order for this project to be successful, we're going to have to hear from the larger community, just in terms of, I think we've heard some of those concerns tonight, that some people are going to be concerned about the cost. Pine Glen parents may be concerned about how long their school sort of takes to get finally done over. So my suggestion, and I brought up to Superintendent Conti, was perhaps the committee could consider requesting a non-binding referendum go out to the town, which is essentially an election that would go to every registered voter with the 2 different options as to how the town should proceed. And hopefully that would be able to provide a little bit of input into the committee as to how the community as a whole feels about sort of the 3-school, 4-school. I think it would give us a better sense. I think some others have brought it up. Debt exclusion votes can be very difficult and painful, so I do think it's important that we bring the option to the town as a whole that is most favorable, most in favor. And again, hopefully that gives the debt exclusion, if we have to go down that road, a better chance of success. A non-binding referendum is essentially a survey. So we're working with our attorneys just to see the feasibility of how to do that, working with the town clerk. But again, it's all contingent upon whether this committee thinks that that's a good way to sort of take, a temperature of the town from outside the Fox Hill area. And again, I'm not trying to criticize Fox Hill. If I lived in the Fox Hill area, I'd be paying very close attention to what's going on here too, but I don't feel as though the rest of the town has weighed in or provided input to this project. And again, I'm not because they haven't had an opportunity, but more than likely just because it's not as immediate concern to them. So that was my suggestion to Superintendent Conti, and again, it would be the will of this committee as to whether or not we sort of proceed in that direction or not, but just a suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I wanted to clarify that the vote would go out to the public. It wouldn't be a vote to the select board. The select board would have to call the referendum, but they wouldn't be the ones voting. I was able to find this Ipswich sample ballot that went out. Ipswich. One other important piece of the debt exclusion is that it needs to pass town meeting with a 2/3 vote. So I did think that this referendum was appealing because it would let town meeting understand if the project was supported or not, so that we could get 2/3 vote in town meeting, which I think will be difficult for any debt exclusion. Ipswich had a failed town meeting vote. They had to leave the MSBA and go back in, and they still could not figure out. So then they finally sent out this non-binding referendum just this past May. So this was just an example that we found, and we spoke with Amy Warfield and the town council to start thinking of how we could do this. But I think I've heard before, right, we're not reaching everyone, we're not getting feedback from everyone. This felt like a really good opportunity to make sure everyone gets a voice in this project, and it could really guide this committee to make sure we're putting forward something that will be supported from a financial perspective. Martha, did you have a? Oh, okay. Any other commentary? Steve?
As far as the MSBA's process is concerned, this is entirely within the town of Burlington's hands. You know, the non-binding referendum or debt exclusion, whatever that ultimately becomes to help fund the project, is entirely up to the town and the town's leadership structure. So whatever means is necessary, if by discussion and support by this committee to send it to the select board or whatever that process is, I think what Paul's getting to is, hopefully fostering a discussion about the best means to go about that. But in terms of MSBA, the enrollment agreement, the options that we're studying, everything is on the table in terms of what the options are and what we've developed during PDP, and the support of that from the town. The MSBA is just looking for you in the town to determine the best way to get to that support. So from a process standpoint, it's kind of in your hands to determine the best path, and to whatever means we can do to help you and provide data to do that, we're more than happy and willing.
Mrs. Bunker?
So I have a question about who
or how is it decided what wording is going to go on this ballot? Just because, like, if you're a resident and you know nothing about this, is it going to be clear what you're voting on as far as how it's affecting you as a taxpayer, and also what the building implications are, whether it's, the larger school, the smaller school? Do we as a board decide what's going on this ballot, or is that going to be the select board that does that?
The town council, so the lawyer for the town, would be the final say. Legally, yeah. I mean, yeah, we could write it. Yeah, I mean, she would have the final say. Sure, Steve.
The MSBA does require a review of the language.
Okay.
So it does need to include certain portions of that. Included is it's an approval of the full amount, not just the whatever the debt.
Okay, yeah.
service
So
would be to the
this
town.
would be different. This would just be the referendum. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Bob.
Okay, so I guess, sorry.
Go ahead.
My question would be, can we have a vote as a committee prior to legal getting the final say, or the MSBA, just so that we're all on the same page of whether we approve what's going out as a question, I guess?
I guess, Ms. Bunker, I guess I'll just say, the gist we got from town council was when you're writing survey questions, it's very tricky to make sure that they're written properly and very neutral to the reader. So I think that's where town council would come in, just to sort of review the question, just to make sure, that there's neutrality there and it's not written in a way that sort of favors one option or another. So again, we're exploring, and the town hasn't done its own non-binding referendum, so it's a new concept for us, so we're looking into the legal aspects of it now, and we can certainly report back at a future meeting if the committee chooses to go in that direction.
I think Bob had a question.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I was concerned about the neutrality of how it's worded, so as long as the council would be able to, lead us in that direction, I think that's great.
Thanks. Is this just an example of only having 2 options on the ballot, since there are 8 options on the table? And the reason I'm asking that is again, should the committee at some point either decide what options to take off the table before we even discuss only putting 2
Yes,
options on
so-
the referendum?
Yes. Like I said, this is just an example. This was 4 choices in Ipswich. We could put, ours could say, and I think Lisa was looking further into it, like the rules around what we can ask and what we can put on the ballot. But yes, that I think we need some lead time. I think Amy needs X days before to be able to put together a vote, an election. But I think the language, and I know Paul is working on figuring out the logistics, but yes, I think to your question.
Just to follow up, so again, we would at some point prior to decide where we're at with the 8 options?
Yes.
Okay.
Roger.
I'm mostly concerned that before you can pose this kind of a question, especially a simple one, we need to do a lot of education of the voters about the depth of the thing that they're trying to answer.
Yep.
As was raised earlier, we have several issues that need funding over the next 5 or 10 years. They are pretty much all of them are going to raise taxes one way or another. I think asking too narrow a question, you won't actually get the answer that is well informed. And when people come to actually having to vote on spending money, they will be conflicted about whether they have the right basis for the vote. So I'm a bit concerned, and also in terms of a timetable, because this committee has, in the MSBA, has a timetable to pick a design by November. And the combination of trying to do enough education, which we've been trying to do continuously, but we haven't reached everybody, and get it done in a timely fashion, I think that's a concern. I'm not sure you'd get the answer you're looking for. But thank
Chris?
No, actually, you said almost exactly what I wanted to say. That was my concern, too, is getting the right amount of education out for people to really make an educated decision if we put this out there. So I'm not going to say any more because you said what I wanted to.
Jeremy?
Through the chair, if I may. So I agree, there is a short window for education. Having been the most recent member elected to this committee, I started campaigning in January, and the vote was made in April. I think the members of this town are well within and well educated enough that they can make this decision in a very informed manner in that 3 to 4 months. So I think we don't need to sell short our constituency in their ability to grasp a subject.
Chris?
So I think there are so many unknowns that this is going to be very difficult. For instance, one of the things I wanted to bring up tonight was when you look at the financial documentation, we have the single school, the combined school, and then we have 2 new schools. But 2 new schools is not an option. In fact, it's not an option to the extent that I don't think it should be on there. We know that if we do the single school, we have to address Pine Glen, but we don't know when. We could do it in 2 years. We could do it in 3 years. We don't know if it would be a new school or if it would be a rehab. Bob and I talked about this yesterday. It's possible that we could add a new gym and cafetorium and rehab the classroom wing. So we have no idea what the cost will be or where the interest rates will be in a few years when we get to do Pine Glen. So one of my problems with this whole thing is I believe we have a bunch of false premises. the least expensive option for this town right now is to simply do Fox Hill. And when we get to Pine Glen, we get to Pine Glen. And as long as I've been on this committee, the intent was always to rehab Pine Glen. It was always to make a new Fox Hill because especially Eric can't stand the snowflake design. I would have been even willing to look at rehabbing Pine Glen, but the plan was always to rehab, Fox Hill was I would have been willing to look at doing a rehab there, but that seemed to go out, the baby with the bathwater. Pine Glen, I'm not so sure it's going to be as big a project as people are saying. And if we have the ability to house the special education programs that Dr. Conti is desperately trying to get included in the Fox Hill School, we're not going to need a bigger Pine Glen. So when I sit as a retired, fixed-income person who doesn't want my taxes to go up either, I look at the fact that Fox Hill only is the least expensive impact on my tax bill right now. And when we get to Pine Glen, and hopefully we can put it on the 10-year plan ahead of a lot of work on the high school, I think we have to move it up because it needs work. It is not dilapidated, as a former speaker tonight said, nowhere near. And if you ask the people whose kids go there, they will assure you it is not dilapidated. So when you talk about this referendum, what kind of numbers are you going to use? You're going to say, well, it would cost this much. Would you like to do a single school, or would you like to combine the schools, which clearly is a hot button in town? And if you combine the schools, you'll pay more, but you won't have to do Pine Glen later. So it's like the project schools that we did years ago, where we were going to combine Memorial and the middle school. And the taxpayers said, no, do one at a time. So I just don't see any way that you can put a referendum together that is real and true with costs. And I also think that this committee has not even voted. We haven't even taken a straw vote on what we think. So to jump out and make a referendum, to me, is just, why do we have all these meetings? Why do we have a building committee if we're going to listen?
If we're going to listen to the public?
No, if we're going to listen to Mr. Sagarino suggest that we should have a referendum, because what are the reasons that we're in this boat? Why is there such a controversy over Pine Glen? Listening to the public is totally different, and as Pat Angelo here left me a long message not too long ago about our virtual-only parent forum or resident forum, and she made a very good point that people can't go to it if they don't use computers. So why aren't we having more public forums where people can actually come in and tell us what they think, instead of having a vote where we plant seeds in people's minds, people who don't understand it fully, and we try to get them to vote the way we want them to vote, which is exactly what is going to happen. There will be two sides, and they will battle it out with signs and letters and all of that stuff, and it's going to be a mess, just like Project Schools was. And one last thing, I just want to make sure this is actually an election, right? We go to the polls and we fill this out. This isn't some sort of town-wide survey where you mail it out.
Ms. Monaco, in discussion with the town clerk, it would be run just like an election with mail-in ballots.
And what would it cost the town to do that?
She estimated approximately $30,000.
$30,000 to do this? Okay. Thank you, I've had my say.
Mrs. Priest.
So So I just want to point out, when I originally purchased my home in this town 13 years ago, Memorial was finishing up, and that cost the town, I think it was 28 or 26 million. The Fox Hill only school is going to be 93 million. That's been 13 years. So if we, one thing to consider, not that it's made a decision either way, but costs aren't going to come down. You're not going to see a $28 million elementary school again. So I think when we're thinking about these things, if Pine Glen doesn't get done right away, you're looking 13 years down the road. I can't say it's going to be the inflation we've had over the past 13 years, but it's not going to be the quote that is on that page, like Ms. Monaco said. It's probably going to be more. Let's be realistic. Prices are just going up. And the other part of my question was about whether it was a vote or not, so that was answered. I know Ms. Simons had a question.
No, it's okay. You done?
Yep.
I do think there's a lot of false assumptions that are being thrown around, unfortunately. I feel like already this has become incredibly divisive. I feel already incredibly disappointed that we have this opportunity to build a brand-new 21st century educational facility for students in our community, and people are already this divisive. I'm really disappointed that we want to look at all these options, and I'm hoping we can get rid of some of them soon, because some of them aren't very realistic. Some of them don't meet the educational programming. Some of them cost more the new buildings cost less than some of the additional buildings, that kind of thing. I'd love us to be doing that. We have about 6 months, right, till the November, December meeting. And I don't like the idea of going for a non-binding referendum in theory, because it is hard to make an exact question. But I also feel like there's so much divisiveness already, and there's lots of people who are claiming that their voice is the one, that everybody agrees with them. And I find that really difficult, because I've heard from a lot of people with a lot of different opinions. So my being in favor of this non-binding referendum, at this point, I'm still in favor of it, is because I want to be able to say, look, we asked people who ask people who have kids in the schools. We asked the senior center. We asked, what is it that people are willing to go forward with? Because I don't want this committee, which we do have the final say, it's not up to the select board at this stage. If we come up with, I would love it if we came up with a consensus of something that we felt was the best option for the most students in this community to move forward, and that would have the best financial arrangement. They're all going to be expensive. There's no question about that. But if we had a non-binding referendum, then people couldn't keep coming up to me and saying, everybody agrees with me. And I feel like that will help inform this committee. I agree that it will be difficult to make a clear, simple question, and that the question would only be addressing the issue of whether it would probably only address whether we wanted to build a single 325 student enrollment or 640 student enrollment with 2 schools at the same site, and sharing the gym and such. But if we had a sense from the community that, yes, the senior citizen center, if it was only them voting, they would still support X going forward or Y going forward. And yes, we would have to get into who's going to vote which way and encouraging people to vote and have a campaign. It would be divisive, but I feel like it's already divisive, and I don't see that it would be worse. So I'm really torn about this, but I think that if we don't do the non-binding referendum, then people will keep coming to me and saying, what I think is what everybody thinks. And I think this could be clarifying for people.
Oh, Jeremy, sorry.
So I'm going to be a little bit frank and unpopular here. We're sitting in this room right now because we tried for 13 years to get the high school done. Has not been done. The boilers are at end of life, past end of life. So when it becomes a problem, it's going to be an emergency we cannot wait for. So then it becomes a much more difficult and expensive repair. To the point that was made earlier in the previous comments, further investment by the MSBA won't be made in Fox Hill. So if we decide we need a larger school and we vote for 325, we're not going to get that money because once we cast that vote, it's done, right? Also, too, adding extra space to put just more special education into one school, which I believe, and I'm pretty sure I'm right, is illegal. In Fox Hill, we're adding space right now. We put a capital warrant up to add more educational space, so we know there's educational challenges. Oh, by the way, I graduated in class of '89 from Pine Glen. My daughter goes there. It is the same exact school that I attended in 1989. Maybe a new coat of paint. And if I can I make a motion that we just end the discussion and move to
Melissa, I want to speak.
All right,
vote?
go ahead.
I'll second the motion. There's certainly still time for,
I would like to reply to Mr.
I'll just reply.
Okay, first of all, I did not say that all the special ed would be in one school. The special ed would be the existing lab program that's in Fox Hill, plus half of the program that's at Pine Glen that Eric would like to move to Fox Hill because all of it is currently in Pine Glen. So it would be fixing a problem. And the boilers, I would like to ask Mr. Cunha to address these boilers that are going to blow up and ruin our day.
oh, come on.
Thank you. So I will say, yes, boilers are end of life. They have been retubed already. We have 3 boilers in here. I'm not a betting man, I don't gamble, but if I was to say that, odds would be low that all 3 would go at one time, right? The boilers themselves are not the only aspect of the heating system. It's not something that I want to see. I will make a statement that not only our boilers, but our schools are generally kept in very good condition, which is impactful for us when we apply to MSBA. It's a good and a bad curse to have. So I want to obviously give compliments to our staff, maintenance staff, custodial staff for maintaining these buildings, and obviously for the town support for our buildings. Boilers are expensive. We've had to replace them in other buildings. In our operating budget, we do maintenance yearly on all of our buildings, even a brand-new Memorial, which is 12 years old right now. We still have to replace parts there. So we're watching them. We are maintaining them. We have plans in place. No one can plan for catastrophic, but we can plan for normal wear and tear.
Thank you.
Does a failure by one of those boilers trip the 30% rule to make us have to do this?
No. One boiler does not trip the 30% rule. A full HVAC renovation would trip the 30% rule. We've had that feasibility and estimates done, provided that to the school committee.
Martha.
Yeah, I want to address then the issue of our old buildings that are, as Dr. Conti always says, the important thing isn't the buildings. The important thing is the education going on and the teachers that we have. And the teachers are doing a fabulous job, whether it's the Snowflake at Pine Glen, at Fox Hill, or whether it's the Pine Glen where there's a beautiful gym with wooden ceiling and the wooden ribs, and they're just beautiful. And our teachers are teaching in small classrooms. They're making do. The services are being provided in hallways or in tiny little offices that have been managed. So the reason that I believe we're having this conversation about a new elementary school is because we think they're not up to snuff for 21st century education. Yes, if there was no money available, we would keep going and we'd keep maintaining and we'd keep doing it. But we have gotten the opportunity from the state to help support us, if we use their process, and to create new school buildings, a new school building at the Fox Hill site, or if we choose at the Pine Glen site. I have visited a couple of new buildings. You walk in and the classrooms that the MSBA will support for us are 900 square feet, and I think right now they're about 2/3 that at Pine Glen and Fox Hill. I'm not totally sure. And yes, our teachers are providing incredible education in those classrooms. But if they had a larger classroom, they could do their little groups differently. We could run our RTI groups. Some of the new schools I visited have actual cluster areas, like for each 3 or 4 classrooms, there's a cluster area, and we could have kids not going all the way across the hall, but gathering for our RTI programs, or there could be a speech and language group going on there if that was appropriate, or an SEL group. So we have all these services and we have all this staff, but to me, if we had the opportunity to have a 21st century building, those classrooms have natural light coming in. They are really nice places to be in. And yes, it costs a lot of money, and we'd have to convince the town that it's worth it. There's a lot to be said. They're healthier buildings if they're new, and I would like us to move forward with this. I know that I've talked to teachers at Pine Glen and at Fox Hill. They're like, but I love my little classroom, and God bless them, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's also different to think about a new building, and I'm saying I think we should move forward and do a new building. I also have different memory that since I've been on the school committee for 9 years, I have been told clearly, and it's been clear to me, that the HVAC system is in the situation that Mr. Cuna just explained. This is not new. This has been going on for over 10 years. That's why we applied to the MSBA for 10 years to get support for the high school. As I mentioned at an earlier meeting, the HVAC, the school master plan that we did for our buildings, which is different from other master plans, said that the high school was our top priority, that we needed to do that. That's why 3 years ago I started saying we need a Burlington High School Building Committee, and we finally have one, which is like about a year or so behind the Fox Hill, this school building, the Burlington Elementary School Building Committee. Because when we decided we weren't going to keep asking MSBA, that we did need to have a new or renovated high school, and we're going to have to pay for it ourselves, we put in a statement of interest to the MSBA for the next thing on the list of which of our buildings needed the upgrade most, and that was Fox Hill. Pine Glen is right there behind it, but it wasn't the second number. So I wish we could have the conversation about how do we move forward, because as you all know, I voted for a 4-school model. I like the 4-school model. I like the small schools. But I heard when the state said that they recommended a consolidated school with both, and then we talked to our designers and our engineers and our project managers, and they said, gee, there's a way to do this and keep small schools by doing what I keep calling the butterfly school. And I hadn't thought of that option. I would like this committee to have those conversations about all of our options, to not assume that this is going to be the best. The cheapest is not what I'm looking for. I'm looking to save as much money as I can. I'm looking for what I feel is best educationally and for the taxpayers. And I feel like I need to consider every school and every child. So the non-binding referendum is sort of what's on the table right now, and I'm hoping after we have this conversation, we'll actually get to talk about the 8 options that we've proposed to the MSBA. But because there's so much divisiveness, I'd like to hear from the town. I'd like to hear what people are willing to go for, what people, is it worth it to spend $20 million more and have a butterfly school that will provide 2 schools for our students for $20 million more, rather than going for the single Fox Hill school. But I haven't had that conversation yet. What are the pros? What are the cons of all of these things? So to me, having more input from the town is an advantage. So if Mr. Brooks is going to make a motion, I'd be happy to. I don't know if anyone else wants to speak.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeremy.
Make the motion to approach the select board to move forward with the non-binding referendum.
I'll second that.
Yes.
Will the questions on this non-binding referendum indicate which options would require a debt exclusion?
Again, I think we can talk about that, right? Like, this is just setting it in motion to get Amy preparing for the vote. The questions themselves have not been written.
Again, checking the legality of the vote.
Yep.
Working it through town council, but certainly it would come back to this committee in terms of how to present that information.
Melissa,
Yeah.
one of the selectmen.
I'm just about to call him.
Up,
Yep.
yeah.
Joe?
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Joe Morandi. I'm here as a resident business owner. I'll get to the selectmen stuff later on, but just want to say thanks for all the time you put into this. I think before you vote on the referendum question, I think that you should break it down to what questions you want, so you don't have to go through this again for a second time. If you have eight things up on the board, and then you vote this in, the referendum question, now you have to determine what 8 things without the public understanding what they're going to be. I think the public needs to be aware of what their options are. At least let them listen to it, to what they're going to be. If you just vote on it tonight to have the referendum question put in there, now you have to go back and decide, are we going to put all 8 in here? Are we going to put in 5? We're going to put in 3? So I think that's part of the only reason I put my hand up, is to break it down a little bit to understand what those questions would be before the public, to understand them completely, talk to town council and see where they need to be. Mr. Sagarino will talk to town council all the time and understand, because we do that all the time. We'll ask 5 questions, and they're like, no. Yes, this is what you need to do first. So before you vote it in, I think that you need to sit down and discuss that as a group, like you've been doing with everything else, and I commend you for what you're doing, because it's not easy dealing with the public and the citizens and the business owners and who's getting taxed and who's not getting taxed, and how much is it going to cost, and how come we're paying this, and how come they're paying that, and how come the seniors got to do this. So I'm glad I'm on the Board of Selectmen, to be honest with you. So that's all I had, just a quick question on that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I believe this vote just sets in motion the election. We don't need to vote on the questions. I know Lisa needed to still research what was required, what information was required. Like Steve mentioned, there's certain things required for a debt exclusion vote. This would not be a debt exclusion vote. So I think this vote would just start that in motion, and I know it's going to be a process to put the questions in place.
Yes, there would be a significant process. And again, this would just be to endorse the concept of a referendum, and then there would be quite a bit of work to be done from that point on to figure out the question, to figure out the dates and the timing, et cetera, et cetera.
So a referendum question would be whatever you decide, it would be, excuse me, can I speak again? Sorry. Would be whatever you decide, but the bottom line is, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
You look very excited to talk. The bottom line, whatever questions would be there. Now, that questionnaire is going to go out to the town, or is it going to be an election vote? Is it going to be in April when we have our town stuff? How are you going to?
It's going to be a special election in October or November.
For the cost of what to the town of Burlington?
$30,000.
$30,000. It's a lot of money. All right, I'm not going to ask any more questions.
Thank
I'm going to go back to my seat.
Okay, Mrs. Bond and George, and then we're voting.
All right, I guess you're saying it's going to take a lot of time and effort for us to, make our decision on our questions and everything, and I think it'd be better energy spent with this committee, looking at all the options, and coming down to, I guess, their last 2, if we come to 2 or 3 or whatever we think it is, and then figure out, what we're presenting to the town. It just seems like it's a lot of extra work when we already have a lot of work that we're trying to accomplish, to do this referendum. That's, it just seems like more than what we really need to have on our plates.
Could we get a clarification from Mr. Sagarino? How much time do you need before to make this happen?
Amy wanted as much time as possible.
Okay. That's the issue.
Yeah.
We need time to plan.
George, and I guess Ed's on the phone too.
Thank you. So I have a couple of questions. One is, if this vote passes, is that basically committing us to the full 30,000? Does it get this process going to attend?
George, I think the vote is just going to be set the research part of it in motion. It's not going to cost us any money until we determine whether to actually move forward with it. And again, there's some legal issues that need to be looked into. Again, the town hasn't done one of these referendums on a local in many years, if not at all, that I can recall.
George,
So-
the select board also has to vote to put it out, like so.
Okay. So then my second question has to do with a tool that we haven't talked about in a while, the criteria matrix. That was a tool that's supposed to help us narrow down by prioritizing what's favorable and not the options that we have in front of us. Are we using that tool? We haven't talked about it in a while, because doing this and saying, well, what's the town think, it kind of punts on us doing our job first.
I think I would argue it helps inform the criteria matrix, but Ed?
Who was first?
She's not on.
She had her hand up.
Thank you. Sally Willard, town meeting member, precinct 4. My only concern is that there be a vetting of the townwide mailing. As if you recall back with the CPA, excuse him, if you recall back with the CPA, there was a kind of sloppy distribution of information, and I would really like to see that someone had vetted the townwide mailing similar to the Secretary of State, so that you get something that's balanced as opposed to what came out for the CPA. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Ed, are you there?
I am, thanks. So I want to put in my 2 cents. I agree with Mr. Sagarino that we've had an exceedingly narrow and set of input to date. A lot of the public concerns about the impact of a larger school could best be addressed by not building a school at all. And we heard tonight from a resident who didn't particularly want to pay for any building of the magnitude that we're looking at here. So I think we do need some input on the priorities of the town, and it's pretty clear to me that there are some basic questions that we could ask. Are we interested at all in making these capital investments in our schools? And do we want to address 325 students and families, or do we want to spend a little more to address double that? I'm disappointed, as someone who uses a variety of market research techniques to find out things like this, that we're not availing ourselves to those. But I understand that in this context, none of those are perfect. I'll also tell you that hands down, any good market research study would cost well more than $30,000. So the real crux of this matter is that we need the residents of Burlington to decide about allocating their taxpayer dollars. That's essentially a political process. And a referendum is the market research technique best aligned with that political process. And, you know, the divisiveness of this was mentioned. That's necessary. Democracy is not perfect. I think we should duke it out. I think we should all go out and try to convince our fellow citizens of what we think is best, and then let them decide. The more I hear, the more I think this is a very good idea. That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Mrs. Bond. No. Mrs. Monaco.
No.
Ms. Simon.
Yes.
Mr. Brooks.
Aye.
Dr. Conti.
No.
Ms. Kasha.
Yes.
Mr. Kuna.
Yes.
Mr. Sagarino.
Yes.
Mrs. Priest. Aye. Mrs. Bunker?
Aye.
I didn't get Mr. Rosenblatt, Mr. Vaughn, or Denizio. Anybody else join, right? No. Okay. I am a yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 803. Motion passes.
Okay, next on our agenda was to discuss all 8 building options. Donna is joining us virtually today, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Donna.
Hi, thank you.
I'm sorry, can I
Good
just-
evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
830, not 803.
830, you're right, sorry.
Yes, we can hear you, Donna.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you. Yeah, so just to follow kind of to what we were just somewhat talking about is we submitted the PDP that included the 8 options as required by MSBA. And now it would be great to start really focusing on the options that really meet the educational program and that we can further evaluate and continue to evaluate. And I just want to remind everyone, it's not over the next 6 months. We have 4 months that we need to come up with the preferred solution. So it is, we're starting to get into a time crunch. We really want to focus our efforts on the options that really make the most sense to further consider and evaluate going forward. So I don't want to spend a lot of time looking at all of the options. Everyone has seen them. We have the 8 options in front of us. If you want to just quickly, Christine, I think you're driving the bus here. We have a repair-only code upgrades that would bring Fox Hill up to code but not meet any required educational improvements. The next option is a 325 student addition renovation that would meet the requirements mostly for the educational program, and the building would need to be vacated in order for us to perform addition renovation to the school. The next option, and as you can see, we've really started to explore various options within a new school for 325, and we're really excited about starting to get into this. Like, we have a few months to really start thinking about what would be the preferred location, 2-story, 3-story of option 3. We believe option 3 should remain obviously on the table for further conversation. The next option was option 4, which we previously showed, which was just a code upgrade. But option 5 is a renovation addition to Fox Hill for 640 students. Again, building needs to be vacated, and it meets the educational program, but not ideally. And traffic would obviously be a major concern based on the location of the existing building. Option 6 is looking at a 640 student school for a new school at the Fox Hill site. We've had lots of conversations about this, and we would look forward to having further discussions regarding this option. Option 7 is a renovation addition for 640 students at Pine Glen. We're showing you conceptually it can be done while the existing school remains remains occupied. But as you can see, that this is an extremely small and challenging site for 640 students, and we do believe that it would be problematic for addressing all of the parking and traffic concerns. Option 8 is similar. It's a new school on the Pine Glen site, and very similar to what I just stated about option 7. This is a very large school on a small parcel, and as you can see, based on the parking requirements, it would utilize most of the site. So, and option 9, I think, is not really to be voted on. It's just a concept that we've developed to help everyone start think about what a 325 student school would look like on Pine Glen. This isn't an option for consideration for tonight or for deliberations tonight. So we have this cost slide, which I think has been updated since we presented this, but this is, the costs that were previously discussed. I'm sure Christina or whomever has an updated cost slide that we could include, but we just wanted to show this as well as it relates to the cost of each of the options. I think when we start looking at this, what's important is that we start talking about or thinking about this is order of magnitude and for comparative purposes. So when you look at a base repair project, it's going to cost approximately $64 million. When you look at a new school for 325 students, it's it ranges, but anywhere from 102 to $107 million. So you can see that what you actually have to put in just to upgrade and repair the building is significant. And so we're just trying to give you context for comparative purposes. We're not trying to get into what the district share is or taxpayer share. It's just so when you start evaluating the options, you can start putting these into context of one versus the other. So you have a base repair for about $64 million, and it goes up. A renovation addition actually is more expensive than a new school for 325 students because we actually have to provide swing space for the students. And then if you look at the same as it looks as we look at a 640 student solutions, you're looking at $163 million for 640 students and somewhere about $152 million for 600 for a new school. And then when we look at the renovation and addition at Pine Glen or a new 3-story at Pine Glen, it's in line with the 640 student new school. So with that, and if you want to just go to the next page, Christina, I think what we really want to have, and this is difficult to read in its entirety, is to start that conversation tonight. And someone said we had a matrix, we should be using it. And so I think we just want to ask the committee to start discussing all of the options tonight so that hopefully there's consensus that we can start focusing on the real educationally appropriate and cost-effective solutions that we can further discuss before we have to make a preferred solution in the fall.
So Donna, I couldn't agree with you more. There's been a lot of talk about ambiguity tonight, so I'm going to be the one to throw it out there. Like, let's remove some ambiguity. If it doesn't meet the educational program, I'd like to make a motion to remove those options because that'll add some clarity.
Second.
Discussion.
What numbers?
Are we talking 1 and 4?
1 and 4, yep.
Yes. Mrs. Bond. Aye. Mrs. Monaco.
Aye.
Ms. Simon.
Yes.
Mr. Brooks.
Aye.
Dr. Conti.
Yes.
Ms. Kasha.
Yes.
Mr. Cuna.
Yes.
Mr. Sagarino.
Yes.
Mrs. Priest.
Aye.
Mrs. Bunker.
Yes.
I'm a yes. What did we say? That's 12. 11-0-0. Ms. Simon.
Madam Chair, I'm not sure that there's as much unanimity, but I'd like to make a motion to also eliminate option 2 and 5, if I'm correct. Those are the add and renovate, because they both cost more. They're not ideal for the educational program. They would need to vacate the building, which we don't have anywhere to put those students, and they cost more than a new building. So I'd like to propose a motion to remove number 2 and number 5. Did I just say? Does that sound right?
Yeah, Christina, maybe you could just go to the first one that had all the options, which might be easier to read than this one, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
There you go. That's
So
probably easier.
I will make that
7
motion.
is a renovation edition too, right?
And 7 also, then, and remove 7 as well.
I second it.
I second Martha's motion.
Okay. Oh, sorry, hang on, I'm just trying to review.
And this will also make it easier for me to read the charts and compare things.
Okay, discussion on this. All right, gonna go around the horn again. Yeah, oh, sorry.
So
George.
I have a question, Donna. This might be for you. Looking at slide 9, the previous SBC comments with some highlights on at the bottom of the slide, preliminary evaluation of alternatives and final evaluation of alternatives. Which step are we in this?
I'm sorry, what slide? Are you-
Slide 9 from the latest deck, I understand. So at the bottom of the highlights talk about the preliminary.
Yes, thank you. So as part of the preferred schematic report, we are still going to be providing costs for a code repair, a renovation addition, and then new construction. So they still want us to evaluate those. Per the PDP, we stated we weren't taking any off the table. So now we have to advance all 8 of them as part of the evaluation of alternatives for the PSR preferred schematic report. You voting on these?
Thank you. Does.
I lost
Doesn't mean that we want to focus on any of them though, right? So you're helping us move the conversation along.
Bob, I just can't see if anybody's online. Has a hand. Okay. We're good in here. Mrs. Bond.
Aye.
Mrs. Monaco.
Aye.
Ms. Simon.
Aye.
Mr. Brooks.
No.
Dr. Conti.
Yes.
Ms. Kasha.
Yes.
Mr. Cuna.
Yes.
Mr. Sagarino.
Yes.
Mrs. Priest.
Yes.
Mrs. Bunker.
Yes.
All right, so that, and I'm a yes, that's 10, 1, 0.
So what options are still left?
3, 6, 8.
So what would be
So
left?
new buildings, 325 at Fox Hill, 640 at Fox Hill, or 640 at Pine Glen.
Are there 2 640s at Fox Hill in 2 different places?
That's still option 6. I think that's where we're gonna go now, right? As we can talk about, now that we only have 3 left, we can get more serious on those. All right. Thank you. is that enough for today, or? Okay.
I'm sorry?
So now is it time to start looking at the criterion matrix with 3 options?
Yes.
Great.
The only other additional part of the presentation we had, including the 8 options review, was reviewing some taxpayer impact information that the Ways and Means group had put together. And Roger is going to speak to this next couple slides.
Madam Chair?
Sure.
Just before we move on, it's my understanding, would that then mean that at the next meeting or the next time that documents are sent out, this criterion matrix would have only the option 3s? There are more than one option 6s and option 8s, and then hopefully it'll be easier for us to fill out that matrix and discuss it and think about the different things. Okay, great, thank you, and I'm sorry to interrupt.
It's okay, Martha, I just want to clarify with that. We can't change
The numbers, just so you know, so we will be studying those odd or even numbers. We'll be studying 3, 6, and 8, just so you know.
No, but there will be 20 columns. There'll be
columns will be
the columns is what is confusing me. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Roger, all yours.
All right, so in the presentation materials, there are a couple of pages that John Eiler and the Ways and Means folks, subset of the Ways and Means folks have looked at to sort of reevaluate taking the cost numbers from the that were provided for the overall costs, and then, yeah, sorry. So we built a spreadsheet to help figure out future costs, starting with the estimates for the building based on square footage that were provided, and trying to take into account future bond rates, the possible costs of the price going up due to inflation, and the timing of having to put it out to bond or anticipation notes or full bonds. There's a lot of detail. It probably isn't necessarily interesting for me to talk about. We did sort of isolate in the bottom of, I don't know if you could, yeah, that slide. The 3 most likely options and what the estimated cost to taxpayers would be. So the cost that's here, the real cost will end up being the annual cost of the payments on the bonds, which varies based on mostly on the original cost at the beginning, and then how that falls into the rates per thousand of the taxpayer. The numbers that show up in the last couple of columns are picking a median taxpayer, somebody for which there are as many taxpayers above and below residential taxpayers. So it's not going to be the cost to everybody. It's a sort of a representative cost. And there's a projection to forward as inflation goes forward, the costs will appear to rise, but it's easier to explain in terms of constant dollars. The different options obviously have, they cost things, different amounts. There's a lot more to do in terms of estimating and refining and picking the particular design patterns. So I wouldn't get too attached to these particular numbers, but they are a representative annual cost per taxpayer for as long as we have to pay off the bonds, which is estimated to be probably 25 years, starting in a few years after the project gets started. I think that's probably enough.
Yes, Mrs. Priest?
I just have a question. The numbers that, I'm sorry, and I know we're not going to get fixated on them, but it says total project cost. So you didn't take the cost of the district share after the MSBA contribution. You took the whole cost of the building on those ones.
The bond part that will be bonded will be only Burlington's share. So that's
okay.
Not
That's
the
the
total
second.
cost.
The
It's
second column.
The
Okay,
second column
thank you.
is the district's share. Yeah.
Yep. Go ahead.
I really can't see that. All I want to know is 2 new buildings on there as an option?
Yes,
think
there is
so.
an option that includes
Thanks,
the Burlington paying 100% for a new Pine Glen plus the MSBA reimbursement option for Fox Hill.
Okay, so I strenuously object to the two new schools being on there because it's misleading. It's clouding the message. There is absolutely no way that we're going to build two new schools right now, and it should not be an option that the public thinks is an option. It just isn't. So I brought that up earlier. I know John Isla had something to do with putting these numbers together, and I spoke with him about it last night, and he totally agrees with me. It's not an option.
Right.
So it shouldn't be there.
Right, so I agree. In terms of the process that's going forward, right, we've got the financial subcommittee of this committee, which is discussing options and pricing. Town Hall 1 is a subcommittee that looks at bonding and finances of the town-wide, and they're going to have a meeting in the middle of August to talk with the town administration and the town's financial team to figure out how things lay out. A big question which came up earlier, and I agree, that planning a new Pine Glen is a separate, in some sense, a separate feasibility study.
Right.
To discover exactly what should be done with that and the timing. So I think, I agree, at this point, it's a little trying to getting ahead of the game to put that number on and carry it forward. So I think in the future, we'll remove that.
Thank you.
Will we also stop talking about a Pine Glen in 2 years then?
No.
This group?
We'll do that at the school committee meeting.
I would guess.
We're talking about it, we've said it 3 times tonight that we could possibly do a Pine Glen in 2 to 3 years, and that's not an accurate statement if we're removing this from the equation.
Oh, sorry.
No, so like I said, it'd be inaccurate to say that because we've said it 2 to 3 times tonight, that Pine Glen could be done in 2 to 3 years. So if we're going to remove this from that, then we're going to stop talking about Pine Glen in 2 to 3 years. What I, asked for.
I would say that, yes, until I guess the school committee starts a separate process to figure out what to do with Pine Glen, I don't think we need to talk about that anymore, personally.
Right, but the difference, Jeremy, is that people have been saying things like, oh, Pine Glen is way down the pike. Kids are going to have to wait 10 or more years for Pine Glen. And that is only true if this school committee, if the 5 of us don't step up and do something about Pine Glen in the next few years. So maybe we should talk about it at school committee meetings instead of here. But the point is, I've already asked for a feasibility study next year for Pine Glen in a school committee meeting. So I don't think it's so out of line to make the point that at least this member is not willing to push Pine Glen out 10 years.
Nor am I, and I completely agree with the call to action, but again, there's 3 buildings we need to consider, and we need to prioritize appropriately. So anyway, we'll get to the next school committee meeting. Sounds good?
So I'm also confused, though. Are you saying you don't believe it can get done at the same time, or within 2 years of the Fox Hill project? Or no? You?
I think that Pine Glen needs its own feasibility study. Maybe it wouldn't be, maybe because some of the work is already done through this building committee and this feasibility study. Everybody knows I'm in favor of 4 schools. So let's just say if we do the Fox Hill School, then somewhere in the next couple of years, we have to start looking at Pine Glen. It cannot wait a decade. So whatever we have to do, we have to get that ball rolling. So I don't know what your question
So
is.
I agree there, but you're asking us to take it off of this because you said it won't get done for 10 years.
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is it is not part of this building committee's options. We cannot do 2 new elementary schools right now. It's got nothing to do with this committee. It's just not an option that we should be looking at.
I see.
No matter what we did, we can't do it right now. It's not, we have no feasibility study for Pine Glen.
Okay. Ms. Priest, and I see Ed on the phone.
The Fox Hill and Pine Glen at the same time was requested by community members during multiple meetings that we weren't putting those numbers out there. So they wanted an idea for tax impact purposes, and I know a lot of us understand that, and I think it's been pretty clear that it's not being done at the same time, and that this is just an estimated cost, as if we just did one school at a time, you know, and we happen to have today's numbers, and that's why I pointed out Memorial cost how much 12, 13 years ago? So we can be clear about it, but we can just take it off too. I think it's being out there for informational purposes so people can make an educated decision. 2 schools are not going to cost as much as combining 2 schools, and people need to see those numbers and wanted to see those numbers, and that's why it was put there. If we want to take it off moving forward, that's fine. I think it needs to be on the website so the taxpayers can see that piece. And I mean, numbers-wise, I can't think anybody can say that we can say we're going to do Pine Glen in 2 years, but that's just a personal belief at this point.
Yeah, I mean, this says delayed. Oh, go ahead, Roger.
I was just going to add that I think having a single line item which combines the two, I think that should go away. But certainly the estimates that we have so far for the costs of building option 9 should remain.
Okay.
But it's a separate item from the other one. We shouldn't try to conflate the goals of the schools as if it were a single thing, or if
Sure.
for identical consideration.
Yeah. Ed?
I want to state my position clearly, that it is within the charge of this committee to consider the pros and cons of building option 3 versus option 6. And we cannot consider 3 as it is at all relevant to the town without considering the prospective costs of the Pine Glen renovation or rebuild. And the more urgent that is, the more reasonable and appropriate and necessary it is for us to enumerate those costs here. And you can put them on 2 separate lines. It would be, any reasonable analysis would lead you to add the 2.
Yes, thank you. All right. Any other topics not reasonably anticipated?
Next is any additional public comment?
Do we get to speak twice? Okay, Nicole.
Hi, thank you for your hard work on this. So I have a couple of points here. So I was reading about Ipswich and an article I found.
Can you just state your name? Sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm Nicole Niedermeyer. I was reading about Ipswich while I was waiting to speak. And so there is an article, and I'll send it to you all, and it's about basically, like, what's going on here is that you spent $1.5 million on a feasibility study, right? And we kind of don't know what we're doing a little bit. It feels like we assume that we can't get Pine Glen back into it. And here it says, others claiming state requires 10 to 20 years waiting periods between projects. This is not true. Towns can apply for state funds every year. And in fact, the average wait time between multiple MSBA projects within the same town is less than 4 years. So I think, like, that's where some of the divisiveness might come from, is there an MSBA person at these meetings? Like, Donna Danisco's an architect, right? Okay, and does she make money off of this project? I'm just asking. I'm not, okay. So it's hard for us to take these numbers and what she's saying and what everyone else is saying and be like, people are making money off of this, and we're not really understanding what we're doing with the MSBA. It feels like that sometimes. And as far as, like, equity and equality, those are 2 different things. Right now, the schools are not equally divided, right? There's more in other schools. Like, we have kids, I think they're from Beacon Village at Fox Hill. And I have to say, Becky's not here anymore, but that was a terrible thing for someone to say to her about Francis Wyman. I live in Fox Hill, and I think all the schools are fantastic, and I love Fox Hill. I went there as a child and moved back here because I like the small neighborhood feel. and I wanted that for my kids, and they got it, and then they didn't care about the school falling apart. They loved it there. But I do understand, like, you can't give special ed in a hallway. That's not actually equitable. That's terrible. And so, okay, I digress. So, but even if you do a 640 school, if that's a butterfly school, you're still 640. I don't know what the numbers will be. That will still be two very small schools. And there will still need to be redistricting throughout the town. So either way you slice it, kids are going to be pushed out to the other schools. And those won't have the options of being, those will be very large schools. And I think that's it. I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you. Nolan?
Thank you. Nolan Glantz again, Precinct 1 Town Meeting member. So the discussion that was just had about the Pine Glen, and I was pouring through the numbers on some of the slides. I don't see that we've done an analysis, or have we, for what it would take to repair Pine Glen in its current state as opposed to replace. I see a line for repair and renovate in addition to bring it up to 640. I also see to replace it as new at 325, but I don't see a feasibility study for that building of what it needs to be brought up to current modern. If there was no option to ever replace it, what would we do with it? I think that should be included as one of the numbers on the table.
It can't be as part of this study, but yes.
But as part of the decision the town makes, I understand this committee's charter
Yep.
and the MSBA process, sure, but for the town decisions and the referendum votes and things like that, we kind of need to know what that picture looks like.
Sure.
Thank you.
All right.
Next meetings. We do have, or we have had discussion of having a community meeting sometime in September. We're still determining what date that will be. We're working with Eric and his team to just figure out a date that works best for everyone. As soon as we do have that date, we'll make sure that not only is it on our website, but we'll email it out, do different email blasts, flyers, et cetera, to make sure that people know about that meeting that's going to be in September. Our next school building committee meeting is scheduled for August 21st. The time right now is to be determined. There might be a conflict for 6 p.m. that evening, so we might have to change that to 7. Once it's confirmed, we'll make sure that the meeting invite is updated and sent out to the full building committee. The sustainability working group meeting is scheduled for August 9th, and our executive working group meetings are scheduled for also August 9th and August 23rd.
Anyone would like to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.